Good morning, welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. It is myself and Supermac today. Good morning, Malcolm.
Hiya, Steve. Yes, John's away on his holes, I think.
He is. He's on his jolly holidays.
Hope he's having a lovely time.
I'm sure he will be. I'm sure there'll be a glass of Chardonnay somewhere near him. He'll be by the pool and he'll be keeping his beady eye on Newcastle United's ins and outs.
Yeah, on holidays he has it for breakfast.
Okay, as always, it's your opportunity to ask a question to Malcolm, and the comment section's there, so make sure you put them in. I did get one on Twitter this morning from a guy called Ken saying, did you ever have you ever thought about going back to one of your former clubs and being involved? He primarily mentioned Fulham. Well, of course, you managed at Fulham, but is there?
I did, yeah.
Has there ever been a, in yourself? Do you think that's it? I'm happy just commenting on the football clubs now and going along as a guest, or would you ever consider making a return in some capacity?
To be honest, to do what? I wouldn't know. I suppose in a PR role.
Yeah.
Yes. I could certainly do that, but no, I've not been asked. I have been asked back to, but it's always just for a match day. When Fulham are playing Newcastle, for example, or Arsenal are playing Newcastle, and I get asked down to those, and I'm happy. I think to sort of leave it at that. But living here on Tyneside. If Newcastle were to come along and say, "Look, we've got an idea. Do you think that you could do this?" Sort of ex-footballers, they have an inside knowledge which is invaluable. But I think though that the game has it shot forward that when they altered the structure to where the First Division became the Premier League, if you noticed, even Sky Television, they sort of ousted everybody who hadn't been a Premier League player. Except there was one guy who continued for a number of years, and that was Phil Thompson, who played for Liverpool. But everybody else, it was sort of looked upon as if you needed Premier League football experience to know what you're talking about, which it doesn't make sense really. But I think that's how they were viewing it. That football is football. It's football. It doesn't matter what you call it. And the game sort of changes every 4 or 5 years, that you get additional things coming into the game, rules get changed, but it's basically all the same. It's always, I've always thoroughly enjoyed being involved at a football club. And when I do stuff with Newcastle United, here and there, I thoroughly enjoy it. Thoroughly enjoy meeting all the people, not just those within the club, but most of what I do is with supporters, and so yeah, it's good fun.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. I mean, just looking back when you had to hang your boots up, Malcolm, did you miss the dressing room banter? Is that the biggest thing you missed as a ex-player?
Well, yeah. There is a banter in the dressing room that is that can't be found elsewhere, and I'm sure that rugby players would have their own stuff in the dressing room, and cricketers as well. But with football, the humour was absolutely fantastic. And when I was here at Newcastle, I was playing with a number of Irishmen in the side. I went to Arsenal, and there were even more Irishmen. And so the Irish humour, I loved it, absolutely loved it. And it was all such quick repertoire. It was fantastic to be a part of. And it doesn't exist anywhere else, just in dressing rooms around the country. But of course, when all the foreign players started to come into the game, a lot of that humour was lost because it had to be, where it was a single language, albeit different accents, it became multilingual. And humour doesn't necessarily carry on a multilingual basis. And so I think dressing rooms became a lot more serious, but also somewhat distant, you know, because you then had interpreters in the dressing room. And so it's a sort of, you're getting strangers coming into the situation. Mind, there's a memory just come back to mind as I was speaking there. I have to say that the most surprising moment that I've ever had in a dressing room was over in Sweden. I was playing for a side in Stockholm called Djurgården, and after my first home game, there we all were, sort of all our kit was off, and we're sort of all pretty much in the nude, and in walks all these men and women, and it was all the journalists, and they just come in, and there you are, and not a stitch of clothing on, and you've got some woman interviewing you saying, "Oh, how did you think the game went?" And it was utterly bizarre, but it was just commonplace to the locals. But I did find that a little bit too much.
Yeah. Okay. Great stuff. As always, get your questions in, Malcolm, if you want one. It's not very often we have a Gibbo free zone, so you can get a word in with Malcolm today. Alan Little says, morning all to Malcolm. What was Jinky Jim Smith like as a player and a person? Was he one of the hard men of football?
Yes, he could be hard to the point of being very nasty. Could Jinky? He had a rough, tough Glaswegian upbringing, and so he was of a particular attitude, mentality that only a place like Glasgow creates. He was, though, incredibly highly skilled, absolutely incredible. Some of the things that he was able to do with a football. You know, I used to watch and just think, "Oh, I wish I could do that," but I couldn't. And he was quite happy to be totally outrageous on a football field. I remember one time we played Wolves at St James Park because Jinky, he was forever getting injured. And so he was never a true regular in the side because of the constant injury periods that he had. But we were playing Wolves at St James Park. The captain and central midfield player for them was a fellow called Mike Bailey, if anybody remembers. And he was a hard case. And Jinky nutmegged him, and Mike Bailey got really angry. And he sort of threatened Jinky not to do it again. And Jinky did do it. You know, it was the old red rag to a bull with Jinky. You know, when somebody says, "Don't you ever do that to me again," he'll go and do it again. And so Jinky nutmegged him again, and Mike Bailey, who was an experienced player, he really started to lose his rag. And Jinky, in the end, finished up nutmegging him 24 times in the game. Mike Bailey was just incensed. You know, he was like a raging bull, and there was just, you know, he was snorting and he just wanted to kill Jinky, and he couldn't get anywhere near him. And Jinky just kept nutmegging him all the while, and in delightful fashion as well. And you have to have a bravery about you to do that to a player and a guy like Mike Bailey. But that was Jinky, that he could take things to an extreme level, and not just nutmegs, but he could do it in all sorts of manner. And there was one time we happened to play Birmingham City 5 times in a month. We played 2 league games, a League Cup game, and I think it was could have been Anglo-Scottish, something like that, Anglo-Scottish competition. And in the first game, Irving Natris was badly injured in a really nasty, vicious tackle, and that sort of put an ugly flavour to it all. And in the next game, I got injured. I would again a nasty tackle. I tore ligaments in my knee, and so it came to the third game. I believe it was the third game, and this was at St James Park. And I was sat in on the roof of the old stand. That's in the press box. The press box was there, and how you got to it was there was a spiral staircase that went up the back of the stand on the outside, not the inside, but you went up the outside and sort of a little walkway over the roof and into the press box. So you had this glorious view looking down, and so things have been rather nasty and quite testy against Birmingham, and I just had that feeling that something was going to happen, and I had actually gone and had a pre-match lunch with Jinky and said to him, "Don't go doing anything silly. Whatever you do, just get the game played, get the game won. That's the most important thing." I said, "You don't need to be looking for revenge on my behalf. I don't want it, and nor does Irving Natris." But of course, revenge was just a part of Jinky's makeup, and he went into Tony Want, the old Spurs player who had signed for Birmingham, played with a 6 on his back. And he just went so far over the top and absolutely smashed his leg to pieces. And the crack was like a rifle shot. And the whole ground just went silent at the sound of it. And Jinky, and this was right by the touchline on the main stand side. And he just walked 2 yards off the pitch, walked up the track, and down the tunnel. And the referee's trying to send him off, but he just walked off. never went and had the tough words from the referee or anything. Just walked off. He knew that he was going to be sent off for it. And of course, Tony won. Dear me, it was a really nasty one. Bless him. And but that was Jinky, you know, that things would go to extreme. And of course, he still lives here near Newcastle, and he can be good company. Can Jinky? He turned up. He went a long while over the past 20 years of not appearing. He never goes to games, as far as I'm aware, but he goes to ex-players' functions and what have you. And he's good company. He really is.
Top guy. Top guy. Good question, Alan. Thank you for kickstarting us.
Indeed.
Bringing us back to modern times, Tom says, question for Malcolm, do you think Szoboszlai is still an option for Newcastle, even if we do manage to sign Maddison and Tonali? Tonali seems to be picking up the pace, doesn't he?
Tonali does, yes. I think I've said this before, but I will say it again. I'm very wary about moving to sign players who've just been in a relegated club. I'm very wary about that. And if you remember, Leicester, they played at the end of the season at St James, and Maddison was actually on the bench. Now, I don't think that was because he hadn't been playing well. I think they just looked to play a totally defensive setup. But nevertheless, if he couldn't get into that side when they were on staring relegation in the face, then little question marks exist. Plus the fact that when you have a really bad season and finish up getting relegated, your fitness suffers dreadfully, and it can take a very, very long time to get up to absolute full match fitness. And what you have to remember is that Newcastle are a hugely high energy side. So you have to be at absolute maximum fitness. Gordon he's found it a little bit tough to try and keep up with the pace that the Newcastle team play. And he did well sort of early on, but it just started to catch up with him. And so I think he has realised that he needs to get himself much, much fitter than he had ever been whilst at Everton.
JB, good morning, says, can you ask Supermac if he remembers being at Blackfell Village Hall in Washington with the local kids in 1973-74? I can imagine you probably went to a few of these things, Malcolm.
I went to an awful lot, yes. And one of the first times that I went to an event, it was at a social club. And it was in a village just outside of Ashington, and I was sort of newly arrived in the northeast and didn't know my way around. And of course, we didn't have sat navs in those days, and so I got so far, and I was very near to Ashington, so I just stopped and asked somebody, asked the guy. Could he tell me the way to where it was that I was heading? And he turned, and I honestly thought I was speaking to a foreigner. I did not understand a word that he said. And I thought, trust me to pick the only foreigner in Ashington, but of course everybody spoke like that. And I honestly, it took me ages before I could understand what they were saying. But I found the place in the end and did the evening. Yes, Blackfell Village, it rings a bell, but I wouldn't remember what actually took place. But I know that I've been there before. But they were always good fun. All of these evenings, they really were.
Yeah, best advice to give anyone going to Washington, Malcolm, who moves into the area is if you go up there and you go to the hairdressers, don't ask for a perm, because they'll say Mary has a little lamb.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. It's. I think it's hard enough for Geordies.
It is, yeah.
Up there, yes. Well, you imagine, newly arrived here on Tyneside from London. Yeah, very difficult.
It is. Darren says rumours that we are being linked for a Crystal Palace Danish centre back Anderson, but Palace want 30+ million for him. Yeah, I'm sure that'll get added to Barry Hogan's list. Barry on the fans forum puts together a list each week with new names on, Malcolm, of how many names we've been linked with since the start of the transfer window. Now, last Monday, from the 6th of June up until the 15th of June, we were at 112, Malcolm, 112 players that would actually be linked with. I'm looking forward to seeing what that total is on the 1st of September.
Well, yes, absolutely, because I think that journalists and supporters alike sometimes forget that there are financial limitations placed upon Newcastle right now. And so, there's talk of there's been talk of Newcastle getting involved with Arsenal in the deal for the West Ham midfielder Rice. Newcastle can't be interested in him, or they might like him as a player, but they're not going to do that kind of business because of their financial limitations at the moment, in as much that they're only allowed to spend so much, then there's no point in going out and spending 100+ million just on one player. And so they've got to be very, very careful in the way that they do spend the money that is available, and look for a maximum amount of quality, but also for not for going for older type players. This is all a build up to a sort of glorious next few years for the club. And I think they're going about it in the right way. But also, I would just point out one other thing, that with the current manager and the board, they don't let anything out. Misdirect, maybe, but they don't let anything out until the deal is done. And then fine, make it public. But nobody has an insider giving them information. That Eddie Howe and the board, they would have said to everybody in the club, you keep your mouth shut, you don't go blabbing.
Yeah, it's great. And, somebody said in the chat, we'll get linked with 100 players and then bang, somebody comes out the blue. So, yeah, yes. It's usually the person that we don't hear about, Mal, which is fantastic. It's the way you want it.
Yeah, absolutely. And yes, they're lovely surprises when they happen. And they will happen. But when you think of the players that Newcastle signed in the last couple of windows, we never really knew until they were literally here and putting pen to paper for Newcastle. Then they allowed it out. I think the only one that there was a lot of talk of prior was Bruno. And then they were saying, his mate Pasquale, is it? Pasquale will come here as well.
Oh, Paqueta. Yeah, Paqueta.
Paqueta. That's
who
it.
ended up at West Ham, of course.
Paqueta. And he went to West Ham. Yeah, not a good move for him, I don't think.
Well, he won a trophy.
Well, I suppose he did, yeah, but it was a miserable old season otherwise for West Ham.
It was a struggle with European football.
Yeah, very much.
Newcastle beware, I guess. We are nearly halfway through the show. Keep your questions coming in. It's a rare opportunity to ask Malcolm some questions. We will play the ads. A big thanks to all our sponsors. Skips and Bins, telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to Mr. Vicky's sauces, which are handmade in Cumbria. Their website is mrvickies.co.uk. If you want to contact the guys, email info@mrvickies.co.uk or telephone 01768 210 102. Big thanks to New Workwear. They are an agile and dedicated workwear provider launched in 2018. For more information, go to their website, newworkwear.com. Big thanks, as always, to Media Arts for the help with the video side of things. If you want to support the channel, hit the subscribe button, become a subscriber today. Hit the thumb up under the video, which likes the video, and click share to share to your other social media. Click join if you want to become a member of the channel for as little as $1.99, or take a one-off payment for the cult membership. You can get in via this QR code if you've got a smartphone, or look for membership pack on the website, nufcmatters.com. What do you get for your one-off £25 payment? You get a scarf, a pen, and a cup, and a membership card, and entry into the monthly draw. Don't forget, if you want a car sticker, all you need to do is subscribe to the show and then email John at NUFC Matters, and he will post you a free car sticker out. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast providers. And we also support the food bank on this channel. NUFCfansfoodbank.co.uk is the virtual matchday bucket where you can make a virtual donation 365 days of the year. The new Alan Shearer raffle is underway. 150 tickets at £1 a ticket. You could win a limited edition signed Alan Shearer ball from the 260 dinner. Enter now at nufcmatters.com. We've got a few events coming up. August the 5th sees Gavin Peacock at the Tyneside Irish Centre. Tickets are £10, and you can get them now from nufcmatters.com. Our Christmas event takes place on the 7th of December at the Tyneside Irish Centre, and that's an evening with Frank Clark. Tickets are £15 and available from nufcmatters.com. Finally, Waddle, Keegan, Beardsley and Friends, the class of 84, is on at the Tyne Theatre and Opera House on Westgate Road in Newcastle on Thursday, January the 23rd. Tickets are now available from the Tyne Theatre and Opera House.co.uk or telephone 0844 2491 000. That's the box office telephone number 0844 2491 000. Don't forget as well, 5 tickets left for the evening with Rob Lee, 1st of August at Tynemouth Surf Cafe. Don't miss out. It was a cracking night, first time round. The first night is now sold out. Second night is almost there, so don't miss out on your tickets for that. And don't forget as well, Newcastle World, scan up and sign for the free NUFC newsletters. Liam Kennedy, of course, does the show on a Tuesday night. You just need to put your smartphone over the QR code and you can subscribe to his email newsletters for up-to-date transfer information. Stephen Kennedy, one of our regulars, he sent me this in, Malcolm. He says, this is an all-time Madrid 11. He says, can you get any better than this team? He's got Casillas in goal, Carlos at left back, Hierro and Ramos at centre-backs, Chendo at right back. On the right wing, he's got Ronaldo. In the centre of midfield, he's got Di Stefano and Zidane. He's got Gento on the left wing, and he's got Puskas and Raul up front. That's his all-time Madrid 11. There's some team there, mind.
It is, isn't it? But he needs to switch round Puskas and Di Stefano. Puskas, I think, is the greatest player I've ever seen. without any shadow of a doubt, and Di Stefano wasn't far behind. The only great problem back then in the 50s, of course, was that there was next to nothing televised from anywhere around, whether it be in the English League, the Scottish League, French, Spanish, Italian. Just never saw any football. Hardly even the international matches. There was so little on the box that, of course, you didn't get to see that much. But if anybody gets the chance to look at Puskas out in the field, oh dear me, he was absolutely sensational. And I remember seeing him. He was in his late 30s, and he played in a testimonial for Bobby Tambling at Stamford Bridge. Bobby Tambling was the Chelsea outside left at the time, and it was a world 11, and Puskas was in it, and by then he had this massive great gut on him. Did Puskas? He was managing some club somewhere, and in fact he might have been older than 38. Just thinking back, I was 15 at the time, and the crowd were just giving him absolute dog's abuse, calling him a fat so and so and all, and so on and so forth. And Hento was playing on the wing, and he just went smack with a ball just inside the Chelsea half. Went smack in field, and Puskas he just chested it, and it came off his chest, and he just volleyed it, boom, and it just went straight in the net, and the goalkeeper never moved, and the whole crowd just shut up, and they never gave him any more stick after that. Oh, it was absolute wizardry. It really was, and what a great fella as well. I actually had the honour of meeting him in Athens. He was managing Panathinaikos, and he was a very. Now, here's a question, because he and Di Stefano were the two star players playing for Real Madrid back then in the late 50s. Each played for 3 different countries internationally. Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But they did. See if by the time we do the next program in a week's time, let's see if anybody comes up with all 3 countries that Di Stefano played for and the 3 countries that Puskas played for.
All right, good question. That's if anybody can come back with the answer then today in the chat or next week. But yeah, today in the chat, let's see if there's anybody got that. Stu Max says, did a paper round once for David Craig when he was the news agent.
Yeah.
I asked him to sign my uncle's copy of the 74 final. He did, but he said, you do know I didn't bloody play, don't you? A great man to be around. Yes,
he didn't play. He was injured, I think, in the game before. And so what happened was Frank Clark was transferred from the left back position to the right back position in place of David Craig, and Alan Kennedy came in and played at left back, and it was a bit of a nonsense, was that final, but yeah, it was a shame for Craigie. He was a terrific right back, but he did have hamstring problems. Oh, he was a brilliant performer, and of course he got a whole host of Northern Ireland caps. But he was a classy player, very classy.
Okay, Malcolm says, David John Cook, I always thought Tony Green was one of the best I had seen. Where did you rate him for playing with in the same team?
Oh, I rated him at the very highest. He was absolutely brilliant. Was Greeny, lovely fella, but he got this awful injury. Crystal Palace. He snapped his Achilles, and oh dear me, what a noise it made when it happened. I was just a couple of yards away from him. An attack had broken down, and we were both getting back towards our own half, and his ankle just turned in a divot hole, and oh, the noise, and he was never able to play again after that. It was such a shame because where he could have got to in the game is anybody's guess, because he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant was Greeny, and he was only a little fella, but he could strike a ball from 35 yards right into the top corner, and he did it more than once, that's for sure.
Morning, Michael West. He says, question for Malcolm, what was your pre-match day meal? And did you have any superstitions before kickoff? Great show, lads. Thank you, Michael.
When I first started playing at Fulham, it was it was almost uniform with all clubs that players eat steaks 3 hours before a game. And steaks are the worst thing you can have, because it can take anything up to 27 hours to digest them. What you need is immediate energy. And so players were turning away from steaks. Bill Shankly, he made his Liverpool team eat steaks, and they were saying, no, we don't want that yet. If it was good enough for me, it's good enough for you lot, was what he used to say to them. And he kept it going. But what I found was the most beneficial pre-match meal was a large bowl of cornflakes. Why? Because it had a particular kind of salt in it that prevented your legs from getting cramp. But I would then not have milk. I used to pour peach juice from a can of peaches on it, and that was sugar, and very, which was very quickly turned into energy. So by the time the kickoff came around, I was literally bursting full of energy.
Interesting. Good stuff. Good question again. Let's pick this one from Jody Toonver. He says, who is or was Malcolm's best friend in football?
A great mate was Frank Clark, and we used to go and have lunch together in the time that we were playing together. At Arsenal, Alan Hudson, and we still keep in contact to this day. And I noticed that that Clark is doing the surf cafe, so I'm just wondering whether I might go along there for the evening. I'll try and spoil it as much as I can. Actually, what I would say is that Frank, he is one of the most intelligent people I've met, particularly in the game of football. Mm-hmm. He was a very intelligent player, and he wasn't exactly a favourite at St James Park. In all the years that he played, there was a lot of complaint about him. And the reason for that was that he never was going to get caught slide tackling or whatever. He stayed on his feet, and this is the correct way to defend. Stay on your feet, goal side, until until the opponent just makes that little bit of a mistake where the ball runs a couple of inches too far, and then you can just nip in and get it. And Frank was brilliant at that, absolutely brilliant. And as a defender, he was probably the best that I've ever played with. As a forward, he was just about the worst. In fact, he hardly ever crossed the halfway line.
C. Dan Smith, good morning. Good to see you back in the chat. He says, I approached Malcolm outside of Derby County in 1971 and I got his autograph, which I still have. And I remember well as we won 1-0. So thank you for sharing your memories.
Wow. What a memory that is.
It is. It is. Ian McKenna.
And Derby County at the time, of course, they were flying. You know, Cloughie was the manager there, and they were one hell of a side. Oh, they really were, and a hell of a defence. The two centre halves, Colin Todd and Roy McFarland, they are the best I've ever played against. The very best as a partnership.
This question from Ian McKenna says, would modern day hard men like Roy Keane and Graham Souness have survived during the era that you played in, Mal?
No, they would have survived, but with more bruises than they got in the later years. The game was literally littered with hard men, and so you had to be prepared to take all the knocks going, and so playing in the late 60s and early 70s, it was a rough, tough time, and of course referees, they allowed stuff to just be commonplace and just keep going on, and some of it, people these days, they're getting not just booked, they get sent off for things that were allowed back then. So the game has changed dramatically. The likes of Souness and Keane and others, they wouldn't have been as effective in the game of today. That's for sure. They'd find their way into the referee's book a great deal more.
David says, I've got a menu from the Gosford Park Hotel that Malcolm signed for my dad. My autograph book was signed by all the team when they played cricket at Linz. Frank used to bring the team there once a year on a regular basis. That's
right. Yes, indeed. We played at Linz, I remember. And we also used to play just north of St. James Park at the cricket ground up there. And and then it sort of seemed to die somewhat. But the footballers, they used to enjoy playing both sports. But I think that with the influx of Irish and Scottish players, and there was quite a number at Newcastle, they weren't really into cricket at all. It sort of died in the early 70s, and I was sorry for that. Linz, what a lovely club that is. It really, beautiful wicket.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic up there. Mr. Anderson, he says, hi, Supermac. We're in for Tonali, and he looks promising. I would like to know who is or who was your favourite Italian player?
Now there are two, and I'm going back to the era that I played in, and they were two midfield players, and they were absolutely brilliant. They were the best in the world at the time, and that's Riva and Rivera. They were absolutely fantastic, and I remember sitting in the dugout playing. Where were we playing? We were playing in Torino, and I was in the dugout as a sub, and I just watched these two Italian midfield players, and they literally just controlled the whole game, controlled everything, and they were fantastic. And this, of course, was when Italian football was at its absolute height. It's gone way off over recent years, maybe even decades. But back then, there were some great players, but the two greatest over in Italy was Riva and Rivera.
Alan makes a good point. He says, "It's Malcolm, it's great being linked with 100 players. It seems a lifetime ago, but under Ashley only 2 years ago, we were only linked to a loan deal for a Leicester player, Chowdhury, and we were desperate for him."
I know.
It's a good point he makes.
It is a good point, yes, how the whole situation has completely turned round. But you see, the difference is, and it's not just money, but the difference is that people who have come in and own and run Newcastle United because they love the club.
Yeah,
they love the club. They love the people. They love the atmosphere. They can't get enough of it. Ashley, he'd come and go as he pleased, and Newcastle United was purely and simply a vehicle to enlarge Sports Direct and turn it from a national company into a global company. And Newcastle did that. Newcastle United, they did it for him. And once Newcastle United couldn't do any more because they had done everything for Sports Direct, the only thing left was to open a shop on the moon, for heaven's sake. And I think that's a bit premature. So once Newcastle wasn't required anymore, he just completely lost total interest. All he wanted to do was sell it. But of course, he had run it seriously down, and has hampered it, has hampered the people who have bought it. So these first 3 years are quite difficult to bring the club up to where they want, and it's going to take a while. But these people, they will get the club there, without any shadow of a doubt. I have every faith in these people. They want the club to be successful. They don't want success for them. They want it for the club. And so we who support Newcastle United, dear me, we couldn't be more fortunate. We really couldn't.
C. Smith says Hungary and Spain for Puskas.
Yes, I think there was one other.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I'm going to have to check the facts, but it was something that came up. But Hungary and Spain, yes. But I just have a feeling that there's one other that he played for, and Di Stefano played for 3.
Okay. Stephen Kennedy says, would today's medical improvements have saved yours or Tony Green's career?
Yes, I think so. Yes. Tony's was a quite different case to mine, but I think so. Nowadays, without criticising at all what happened back in the 70s, but it was nowhere near the professional setup that there is now.
Yeah.
And if and the football club needs a medical side, and so it is full of medical experts, all kinds of medical experts, and of course we didn't have that back in my day. We had a club doctor, and that was it. And then there was a couple of guys doing physiotherapy work, but they weren't really qualified. I remember going to Huddersfield as a manager, and they had and Huddersfield had a part-time physio. He did 3 hours an afternoon, and I think it was 3 afternoons a week. It's
different game now, man. Different game.
Sorry,
it's a different game now, isn't it?
Oh, completely different game. Yes.
Especially if you're like somebody like Sam Allardyce who brings 22 members of staff in.
Well, absolutely. I always remember when oh dear me, Mark Hughes, was the manager of Man City.
Yeah,
and I was outside as the Manchester City coaches arrived. One coach was for the team, and the other coach, which was a sort of 52-seater, was crammed with all the experts that he brought along. Physiotherapy, medical, for just taking players out to get them warmed up and what have you. It was a coach full of experts for just about anything and everything that could ever likely happen on a match day, and it was, and instead of the team bus, it was a team bus, an experts bus, two of them, and I thought how this game has changed. And that was, when was he manager? Dear me, that was before Guardiola. Guardiola's been there, 8 years?
Yeah, it's got to be it's got to be about 11, 12, maybe even 13 years since that team went through.
Yes, it was about 13 or 14 years ago. And so, when you see something like that, you know that the game is changing hugely, and it was a sort of signal as to the intentions of Manchester City as well at the time.
Probably got time for a couple more questions. Who was the best team that you played against, Malcolm, says Mike Stewart?
The best team I've ever played against. Now, of course, you just play the one game and over 90 minutes, and who leaves you the most impressed? Now I'm trying to think who the England manager was. I think it was Wraith, and we played over in the Czech Republic, in Czechoslovakia, and they on their day they were absolutely brilliant. The football that they played, they were so well organised at the back, all good players, all of them, and so difficult to play against. Trying to get going against them was so difficult, and I saw great English players actually struggling to get into the game, and of course, if you look back over the history of Czechoslovakia, they've always been turning out top quality international sides. And they, for me, were one of the best back then in the 70s. Fantastic side.
Sedan Smith says, my father and I were at the Liverpool match, Malcolm's home debut, the hat-trick. I have loved him ever since. Stay well.
Well, thank you, Sedan Smith.
The great T-Dan Smith, of course, was his dad. Always good to have you in the chat, mate. Pleasure to have you in, mate. Ian McKenna says, if you could pick any manager to play under after your career, which one would you pick? I mean, there's some big names we've had since you hung up your boots, Malcolm, in world football, I guess. Is there anyone who you've probably looked at from afar and gone, yeah, I wouldn't have minded playing for him.
Well, I think without a doubt, Guardiola has got to be in the reckoning for that, because he looks at players' strengths and works out how can he, as the manager, create a side that is going to maximise that player's strengths and bring them all to the fore, and the same with all 10 other outfield players. I think he's quite a magician, really, Guardiola. He's got a great record and a great way of going about it. So, and of course, a lot of managers don't know how to handle goal scorers, but he does. If you look back at the way that he handled Aguero. And Aguero, he just scored a bucket load. And of course, Guardiola, he had the side all playing in such a way that it was just setting up Aguero time and again to finish. And it was a delight to watch, I have to say.
Yeah, okay, great stuff. Any memories of Gordon McQueen, says Tom Dixon?
Gordon, yeah, bless him. He was a lovely lad. He always offered you his hand after he kicked you to help you up. He was just a really nice lad, but you were going to get booted up in the air by him, but that was part and parcel of the game, and that's how he did it. There was nothing personal to it at all. Yeah. He was hard as nails, I have to say, and a big brute of a fella. He really was, but he could play. He could play for a big man, he used to look down, and it was almost like he was looking down his nose because he was so much taller than me, and he used to look down his nose and, "Who are you? You're a Wraith." And that was about all you get out of him.
Classic. Good stuff. Good question. The Supermac and Guardiola's team, 60 goals a season, says Ian. And see the championship fixtures are out. Yes, Tom, we don't cover that on this show, as you know. Good luck to Sunderland and Middlesbrough in their promotion campaigns next season. Lots of rumours flying around. My phone has started to light up today. Lots of people seeming to think that we might get Maddison done in the next 24 hours. Maybe we've forced Leicester's hand with looking elsewhere. Who knows? But as you know, we only deal with facts on here, not fiction. We'll wait and see what happens in due course. And maybe next week when Gibbo's back, we're talking about a new signing. Let's hope so. Whether it's Tonali, whether it's Maddison, I'm sure Eddie Howe will do the right thing and bring the right kind of player in. Malcolm, that's been a pleasure. And as always, an hour always flies over on a Thursday. But a nice chat there with the people in the chat.
Yes, absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And nice that people, with all that's going on currently at Newcastle United, that and yet still they've got the time to look back into the past and have the interest there. So thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure to chat with you all and rekindle a number of my own personal memories for me. So thank you all.
Yeah, brilliant, lads. Thanks for the great entertainment, says Mike. Richard Naylor says, even though I'm 75 years of age, I still regard Supermac as my all-time hero. I love the guy. And Doug Hall says, great crack again, lads. Brings back some great memories. JB, thanks, lads. Loved it. Great to have your support, everybody. It's been great. And have a great week. Look forward to seeing you all again next Thursday. Take care, Mal.
Indeed. Have a good week, everybody.
We still do 7 NUFC Matters show a week for free. But if you want to help support NUFC Matters, then there are a few ways of doing it. Hit the like button on each live broadcast and video. This helps the channel grow. Hit the subscribe button and select the all notifications bell so you don't miss a single show. If you want to help us financially, then you can join the channel using this button with the membership starting at $1.99 a month. Or you can drop us a donation in the chat using a super sticker. We're also looking for sponsors. If you'd like your brand advertised on the flyers for the show and featured during the ad break, then email John at nufcmatters.com to arrange today.